Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Veteran-Directed Care Office Hour Session, focused on tips and tools to monitor monthly veteran spending, with a focus on monthly service reports. Before we get started, just a couple quick reminders. When you join the meeting, you have been muted. We are trying to avoid any background noise throughout the presentation. So if you have any feedback or questions or thoughts that you want to chat about, please click the bottom icon of your Zoom screen that looks like a speech bubble icon. From there, the chat will show up for you. And please choose to send your chat to everyone in the meeting so that we can all see your questions or responses and engage in the discussion. We will do our best to continuously address comments or questions raised through the chat feature, but please know any unanswered questions will be addressed in future office hours. I think that is all the reminders we need for today. So I'm going to turn it over to Victoria Wright from the Administration for Community Living, who will provide some announcements and an overview of what to expect for today's call. Victoria.
Thank you, Haley. Welcome. Good afternoon or good morning to those who are on the West Coast. Welcome, everyone, and we are very glad that you can join us today. This is actually our second part of the three-part series of the VDC Office Hours. For those who were not able to attend the first session and are interested in learning or hearing the first session, we have the slide deck and recording available on our No Wrongdoer VDC website. For today's agenda, we will do a recap of our first session, reviewing key takeaways, and we will touch on some of the questions that we were unable to answer from the previous session. We have the Delta Center for Independent Living, who will share their process for tracking monthly veteran spending, sharing it with their partnering VAMC, the St. Louis VAMC. Then we will have our focus topic discussion, tips and tools to monitor monthly veteran spending, monthly service report. And also, lastly, we'll close with our Q&A portion. And then before I turn it over to Pat, just want to remind everybody that if you have any question, please feel free to use the chat box, or you can use the raise hand function on your screen, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. But again, we will follow up. If any question that has not been answered, we'll follow up on our next session. Pat, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Victoria. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here for the second time with you, really focusing in on our billing and invoicing procedures. And just a quick reminder, when we talk about billing and invoicing, yes, there are requirements, there are things you must do, and we're going to be highlighting those. But the overall theme here is how can we align our requirements around billing and invoicing in a way that promotes veteran and caregiver-centric practices. So keep that in the back of your mind. And let's start with our first mentee. We love our mentees. We're going to start with one today. We have a facelift on the monthly service report. So what do we mean by a facelift? There's actually a template, an Excel form to help complete monthly service reports. We've also provided some clarifications in the VDC billing and invoicing guide. So we want to know, have you reviewed that, the template, the Excel document? Have you read through the billing and invoicing guide? Best way to do this, go to www.mentee.com, enter code 98373862. Simple yes and no. And we have 113 people here. So I have a number in my mind that I am going to wait to reach until we get to today's content. So we can bring up those results. We're at 18. That's nowhere close to the number I'm looking for, but people are looking at it. So that's a really positive indication. Let's start. What is the monthly service report? When we say that, want to make sure if you call it something different, that we're talking about the same thing today. So the monthly service report is a document most commonly in Excel spreadsheet that captures actual spending in a given month for an individual veteran who's enrolled in VDC. So this is the spreadsheet that's going to say, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so spent X amount of money in July 2021. And it's going to break down what services were purchased, what goods were purchased, what care was delivered. The template itself does a little bit more than that, and we'll talk about that, but just want to, again, reiterate. So the monthly service report is the monthly actual spending, and that's different from the spending plan. The plan is an estimate for how the veteran is going to use their budget over the course of the authorization. So a lot of that is projecting monthly costs. There will also be some one-time goods and services. There will also be some emergency backup and savings that are going to be included there as well. Okay, so I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing for monthly service report, which is going to be our focus today. Most of you have looked at it, so thank you. We did not yet reach the number I was looking for in my head, but that's okay. I'm running out of things to say here, so we'll stop with that percentage and look to increase that number in our next Menti, because we always have more than one. Let's jump to the next slide. Let's do a quick recap. Takeaway. What did we do in session one? Remember, session one focused on authorizations and spending plans. So those plans that I just mentioned. We realized, the we being VA and ACL, and we've heard from you that, hey, we could really benefit from a spending plan template. Like what would you consider a best practice? And then let us adopt that in our local VDC program. So we've developed that template. It's there for you to use. It's posted on the No Wrong Door website that I'm sure everyone here, the 120 now participants, have bookmarked in their browser, internet browser of choice. So if you haven't bookmarked it, please do. You'll see the billing guide, and if your eyes move to the bottom left-hand corner here, there are three materials that I just want to call out real quick. The billing and invoicing guide, the Word document that says everything you need to do, everything you should do, has appendices for best practices. It has links to other websites. So that is there. We also have the monthly services report template. So I mentioned that. We're going to be talking about that more today. There's also the spending plan. So we spent time in session one talking about the spending plan. So please make sure you bookmark that website, download those resources, keep them handy. All right. Now, what are some of our key takeaways from session one? What did we learn? We can cover some of that on the next slide. I'm going to wait. Could be there we go. Okay, I see it now. Practical takeaways and actionable steps. Why are we having these office hour sessions where we're focused on FAQs and questions? So we're doing it because we want to be focused here on change. Change can be big. Hey, we do not have spending plans right now, so we're going to now do spending plans. That would be a big change. But there's also small changes. So small changes would be, what if we did this a little bit differently? Would this improve the experience of veterans and caregivers? And then trying that change and then measuring if it made a difference. So those are small takeaways and actionable steps. So we heard from medical centers that there are ways in which they could streamline authorization processes, making sure that information about veterans and caregivers, their circumstances, their needs, they can be shared. We also heard that, hey, now that we have this spending plan template, maybe we were just using the monthly services template before and kind of using that in a way to be the spending plan. Maybe we didn't have a spending plan that was really conducive to helping educate veterans and caregivers, show them how their money is going to be spent. So now we want to actually start to implement and use that template. And you want to use that as a guide to make sure that you're following requirements for the program. There are certain things that the VDC provider does, that the medical center does, and these templates, these tools, they help ensure that we follow those requirements. So now what we're going to do here on the next slide is focus.
And just bear with us for one moment. I believe the Pat audio has just dropped. Just give us a moment while he gets reconnected.
Haley, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Thanks,
I had
Pat.
to switch to computer audio. Sorry about that. Okay, Haley, I'm good to get started. I'll just pick up where I think I left off.
Yep, you can pick off with pick things up with kicking off the remaining FAQs.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your patience. These things happen. Appreciate your flexibility and your patience, and when we were able to solve it relatively quickly. So let's go, what we want to do is we want to come back to just some of the questions that came out of Office Hour Session 1 before we transition to our topic for today. So let's kick this off with a question about spending plans. So there's a question about, hey, we get our referrals and it says how much personal care and respite we can provide in terms of a budget, but I'm not familiar with spending plans. Is this something we should be doing? And the answer is yes. Everyone needs to do a spending plan. So when you go into a veteran's home, when you're doing your person-centered counseling assessment, the outcome of that, in addition to identifying goals for independent living needs of the veteran, it's translating that into a plan. So that plan will say how the veteran is going to use their budget on a monthly recurring basis. It's going to outline one-time goods and services. It's going to estimate any needs for emergency backup or respite care. So the requirements there are in the billing guide. We have a template to help with that. And what I want to maybe just take a moment to reemphasize here is the spending plan template now provides a better understanding of the level of specificity that should be included in spending plans. Let me give you an example of what that means. So for example, a lot of the times before the template was released, we would see spending plans include just an estimate of an individual worker, how much they would work in a month and how much that would cost. So let's just say, in a given month, worker 1 works 40 hours and you pay them this amount. So that's great. We have an understanding, okay, the veteran's going to get about 10 hours a week. But that plan really doesn't tell you much more than that. So what schedule is that worker typically providing care on? Is it 2 hours every weekday, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening? Is it maybe 5 hours of care on Saturday and then 5 hours on Sunday? What types of services are being provided there? Is the worker helping with bathing, eating, dressing, just general supervision? So if you think about that, that's really what we want to be in the spending plan. We want to know, we want to have a document that's going to say, what's the typical worker schedule? What services are they providing? How does that tie back to the veterans' goals for independent living? So we've tried to provide you with a template to help take that spending plan one step further in terms of documentation. So it's very clear to the veteran why they're using their budget, how they're using their budget. And we'll talk about why that's important in a little bit as well. So that's one. Why do we have this new spending plan? The next question that we'll go to has to do with the other big change in how we're looking at authorizations and budgets, and that's around global budgets. So the next question is, what is a global budget? And you'll see that here. A global budget is the budget that the veteran has available during the authorization period. So I'm going to make the math easy for me, but if the veteran's budget is $2,000 a month, and they, on average, given their case mix level, and their authorization is for 12 months, well, their global budget is $24,000. And that veteran has access to that $24,000 from day one. And that's important because now we no longer have what we used to call planned savings. And a lot of people used to use the word fund at the end. So planned savings fund. So if you needed a purchase, let's say it could be something small like a microwave, it could be something large like a lift chair. Before, veterans had to save before they could make that purchase. Well, we do not want veterans to have a need that goes unmet just due to the arbitrary need to save. So we want them to have the ability to purchase things that they need on day one. So we also know that veteran spending may exceed the average monthly case mix rate. So I gave you that example of $2,000 a month. Well, if the veteran gets a lot of cares on Mondays, there are 2 months in the year where there are 5 Mondays. And care may be more expensive. Spending is going to be more in those months than in months when there's 4. And that's totally okay. What is our check and balance here? The check and balance is that all spending needs to be documented in the approved spending plan. So this does not mean the veteran is going to spend $24,000 in their first month or in the first 2 months, because everything needs to be outlined in the spending plan. So we're going to be saying here that the veterans workers, we now have their schedule. We're estimating their average number of hours per week and per month in the spending plan. So the veteran's only going to be spending $24,000 in month 1 or month 2 if that's what's in the approved spending plan. So that's our check, that's our balance to monitor budgets, to make sure that we're not spending over the global budget, which is the total authorized amount. We had just a couple other questions, and I'm going to scroll through these just a little bit quicker because I know I'm falling behind here just a little bit. But how to bill for the assessment fee is going to be our next question. So we recommend billing for the assessment fee when the spending plan is approved. So that's the answer here. The recommendation is to invoice for the assessment fee after the spending plan is approved. Now, if the veteran ultimately doesn't enroll in VDC, you would submit an invoice for a partial assessment fee when that happens. And those fees are listed here at the link at the bottom. We have gotten some questions about this. So, how do you look at the spending plan in months? If it takes 30, 60, 90 days to enroll. I think we're going to come back to that in session 3 and just think about that a little bit more. So, but that does address the question about assessments. The next question that we got is, how do you account for one-time purchases in the spending plan? So one of the things that we've done is made sure to have a specific box where any one-time goods and services can be listed in the spending plan template. And you'll see an example here. So the way some of these cells work is a lot of them auto sum. They give you the answer for you. So the bottom right here in purple, that's going to be something that's auto populated, but everything that you see in blue is inputted when you complete the spending plan. And then there are other auto sums that will then say, hey, how much is total spending estimated to be? And there are going to be other ways in which the template will help you monitor spending, but it does allow you to enter information for one-time goods and services. There was another question that came up about background checks. Doesn't really fit with many of the topics that we have in this office hours, but we did want to talk about it quickly today. So on the next slide, what we see here is, are background checks mandatory, or is it left up to the veteran representative? So you have to follow state, local, federal requirements for this program. So if there are any state or local requirements for workers regarding background checks, you need to follow that. So the only thing that we say in VDC is that if there is any worker with a history of fraud or abuse, they should not be employed as a worker. And that's kind of the bottom line here. I mean, we need to monitor those background checks for any history of fraud and abuse. But there are a lot of things, while maybe concerning, may be able to be mitigated. And you really need to think about a person-centered way to approach that conversation with veterans. So if there's something in the background check about maybe drunk driving, how do you educate the veteran on, being able to identify if someone does show up and has abused alcohol, and then document that so we're mitigating potential risks. One last thing, the cost for background checks can be paid using the veteran's budget. Okay, we're going to stop there. And now we're going to transition to our topic for today, which is monthly service reports. And I'm really, really excited that we have today, on the next slide, you'll see our focus topic is going to be on tips and tools for monitoring monthly spending. We have two people here today, and we can just jump to the next slide. Our two people here today, we have Laura. Laura is from the St. Louis VA Medical Center. And then we have Amanda from the Delta Center for Independence Living. And they're going to share how they use monthly service reports in their VDC program. I'm going to start with a question for Laura from the St. Louis VA Medical Center. And Laura, can you tell us a little bit about why you use monthly service reports and how they're helpful for what you need and have to do at the VA Medical Center?
Thank you, Pat. Good afternoon to most. Good morning to a few. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of our practices in our VDC program here in St. Louis today. So as the VDC coordinator, I review the monthly service reports each month for every veteran enrolled in the program. Reviewing the monthly service reports is a key component to the program. It helps ensure clinically appropriate care is being provided to the veteran. So in my reviews of the monthly service report, I start by comparing the monthly service report to the spending plan. The key pieces that I'm reviewing are the veteran's average monthly case mix amount listed on the spending plan, and I compare that to the amount the veteran actually utilized within the program listed on the monthly service report. If I identify that a veteran has significantly overused or underused their monthly case mix budget amount, I flag that monthly service report for further follow-up with our community partner agency. That way I can gain more insight into that veteran's situation and circumstances. In addition, the monthly service report is an important tool to provide program oversight and monitoring. I review the monthly spending reports to ensure there is no utilization of VDC budget during hospitalizations or rehab stays. And I also make sure that the monthly administrative fee is being billed correctly. One last key piece I wanted to highlight here is that timely submission of the monthly service reports to the VA is so important in making this all work. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Laura. That's a great start. So we heard from Laura, just to kind of bring that back, why MSRs, and I'm using MSRs, monthly service report. So MSRs, why they are helpful, useful to Laura and her responsibilities. So now let's pause for a minute. And we're gonna switch gears, and we're gonna talk to Delta Center for Independent Living and Amanda. And Amanda, hoping you can describe your process for developing monthly service reports at the end of every month and that timely delivery of MSRs.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on veteran spending. So the beauty, as we all know, the beauty of the VDC program is that flexibility and freedom that the veterans have with their monthly budget. However, with that flexibility and freedom do come responsibility with tracking their own budgets. Delta Center put into practice some procedures that help us and the veteran track their budgets. So at the end of every pay cycle, Delta Center logs hours and dollars submitted onto a spreadsheet, which our options counselors can view to make sure that the veteran is staying on track. You know, they're not underutilizing or overutilizing the budget. At the end of the month, we update their monthly service report, which updates that global budget that Pat talked about earlier in two ways: what has been spent and what is left to be spent out of that budget. So Delta Center sends that monthly service report to Laura and to the veteran. With the copy being sent to the veteran, they're able to then view their spent and remaining budget and make any adjustments that they may need. You know, for example, a worker is going on vacation for a week, so that backup worker has to step in and fill that role. They may be working at a higher wage, so that veteran can see that yes or no that they can have enough in their budget to cover that extra cost while their primary worker is on vacation. Typically, the monthly service report is completed and sent out in the middle of the following month. So, for example, July's monthly service report will be sent out mid-August, and Laura will get that, and the veteran will get that at that time. Things don't always run smoothly like we would like them to, and people submit their timesheets late, invoices late, etc. So if that happens, we simply revise that MSR once those timesheets and invoices are processed, and then resubmit that to the VA and the veteran. So that's a little bit about our process on those MSRs and getting them turned in to everybody timely.
That's great. Thank you, Amanda. So what did we hear there? So the MSR plays a critical role to Delta Center, to the St. Louis VA Medical Center, and to the veteran and or their authorized representative. And I just want to come back to that. Let's think about a veteran who needs help at home, who's enrolled in veteran-directed care. Employing a worker and managing a budget may be one of the most foreign things that they've done in the past 10, 15, 20 years. Spending $2,000 a month, being accountable for it, owning a weekly schedule, hiring, training, supervising workers, that's a lot. So can the spending plan help them understand their responsibilities? Can the monthly service report then help actually compare that to what the plan was? Hey, are they deviating from that plan, and how can we educate and work with them? So just love to hear about how MSRs bring that back together for a variety of different stakeholders. Now, Laura and Amanda, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how MSRs support working collaboratively together. So how does Delta Center and St. Louis kind of use what's in monthly service reports, not just to send them back and forth to one another, but then how do you work collaboratively using that information to support veterans who are enrolled? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So Delta Center currently meets with Laura on a weekly basis. That alone has been extremely helpful, just because Delta Center's OCs sit in on that meeting and can update Laura on any issues, any questions that the veteran may be asking of us, and we can get them answered very timely. In addition to those weekly meetings, Delta Center also joins our other surrounding agencies in a monthly meeting with Laura. during that meeting, we're informed of any program updates, form changes, et cetera. And we can also look at those MSRs as well and see where the spending may be lost and or is on track. So we can update each other during those calls.
And just to tag on to what Amanda just shared, I think that having a collaborative relationship between the VA program and our community partner agencies is really an important piece of the VDC program and tying everything together. So as Amanda mentioned, we do currently meet weekly. So since the inception of our St. Louis VDC program in 2014, we've trialed many different processes for collaboration and communication with our community partners. And as she mentioned, we currently are meeting weekly. This is a new process that we just trialed and implemented a few months ago. As Amanda shared, I think we both are finding this weekly meeting to be extremely helpful. So in this weekly meeting, it's become an opportunity to discuss different veteran situations or scenarios, but this also has become a prime time for me to review those monthly service reports or MSRs that I've flagged as I'm doing my reviews. And it creates an opportunity for us to be able to engage in conversation about what specifically is going on with that veteran, what's their current situation, their scenario. And we work collaboratively together to come up with a unified plan to help address any issues or problems or difficult situations that the veterans might be experiencing.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amanda and Laura. I see some questions coming in, so I just want to take a moment. If you have questions for Amanda, for Laura, about what we're talking about here, take a moment to use the chat. So I'll pause at the transition and maybe take one or two, and then we'll have some time at the end. But just want to encourage use of the chat as we listen in. So Amanda and Laura, one last question. We've heard about your processes, why this is important, but can you make it very real for us? Maybe talk about a time when monitoring of spending has made an impact on a veteran and caregiver and your ability to support them in VDC. Do you have any examples you would share?
I had to thumb through many examples and pick the best ones, but yes, there are so many. My most recent and favorite example right now is a veteran recently revealed that he has a new goal. He wishes to become more active in the community and get some more exercise at a local pool. So we discussed this goal, which would require transportation and a membership fee for that pool access. The veteran was able to look at his monthly service report and his spending plan collaboratively and add in that cost. He was able to balance his goal with all the required daily needs that he had as well, but he was able to look at what he can still afford on a monthly basis, plus that global, what he could do every month. If he wanted to go more often towards, the end of his authorization, he could, because he would still have that money available. Another example is we are currently working with a veteran who has his spouse listed as an employee, but he gets his daily care, but he also desperately wants more socialization in the community, and he needs that goal and purpose for each day to get out and complete those tasks. So we were able to look at his monthly service report, get an idea of what was left of his budget for this authorization, and we worked on his monthly spending plan to incorporate adult daycare costs. So we were able to factor in a couple days a week that he could do that by looking at his service report and seeing that he still had plenty of money to do that and to meet his goals. So those are really two of my best examples that I can formulate that really fit into that monthly service report, plus coincided with their monthly spending report. And we were able to adjust them both and see that it was possible to meet their goals. So.
Thanks, Amanda. Laura, anything you would add?
We did have one example recently as well, where I had identified in review of the monthly service report or of the MSR that the veteran was consistently going over his budget. His wife was his primary employee, and both the veteran and his wife felt pretty strongly that she should be compensated for every task that she was completing for him or every ounce of assistance she was providing throughout the day. So as a team, Delta and I work together to educate the veteran and his wife that the VDC program isn't always able to provide for every single care need that a veteran has. But I frequently tell veterans that their care needs are one big puzzle, and VDC is an important piece of that puzzle. But we have to work together to utilize other supports and resources to make up the rest of that puzzle so their care needs can be met. So in this case, Delta Center's options counselor found some really great community resources to bring some additional support in and to help that veteran meet his needs and his goals.
That's great. Thanks, Laura. Love that example. Opportunity to level set, to come to a better alignment with the veteran, with their worker around the intent of VDC. So I love that example. And Amanda, pulling this back to being able to meet the needs of veterans. And it's going to be evolving. We have veterans that are enrolled in this program for many years, and their needs are going to change. So we should never have a spending plan that's not living. We should always be looking at monthly service reports for trends that may indicate, along with other things that we do, monthly contacts, quarterly check-ins, to identify proactively if their needs are changing, and how VA services and VDC and other services can help meet those needs. So Amanda and Laura, thank you so much for taking time to share a little bit more. I see some questions, and these are great questions because we're going to tackle a number of them. So we're going to jump right into that. So why don't we go to our next slide? Okay. So first, is there a template to see what is left in the budget throughout the year? So yes, the service report template was developed to assist with this. So there's a number of things that go in the service report. So the veteran's monthly case mix rate, monthly admin rate, we break down actual goods and services purchased. And then what it does is it tracks spending over the course of the authorization. So from 1 month to the next, it'll say, here's what you spent in month 1. And then when you go to month 2, it'll say, hey, here's what you spent in month 2. And here's what has been spent to date. So the service report does allow tracking actual spending over the course of the authorization. Okay. I'm going to sit here and I'm just looking at the chat just for a moment to make sure that I am covering everything. Okay, let's keep going. Where do we access the template? Timely, because in the chat, you'll see this link was just sent out. It's in the chat of the meeting today, just to be clear. So if you pull up your chat, you will see Natalie from our team sent out that direct Excel link. It is here. You can always go to the No Wrong Door ACL website to access all of the VDC resources. Just a couple other things we just wanted to highlight. Please discuss with your medical center how you want to share this. We'll come back to this. Bridget Lee, thank you for your question. We're going to talk about medical centers review, how to share this a little bit more. But we want to make sure VDC providers, you should have a copy of the MSR for each veteran for months that they're enrolled. So I want to make sure that's clear. Okay. What are the administrative rates for mid-month authorizations on our next slide here? Mid-month authorization. So about administrative rates. Veterans can start receiving services any day of the month. They can start using their budget if they're newly enrolled on the 1st, on the 15th, on the 30th, and that's completely acceptable. For months in which the veteran uses his or her budget, receives personal care services, the administrative fee is paid in full. It's not prorated. There's never a half monthly admin fee. It should be paid in full if the veteran used his or her budget. We did get a question in the chat. And I just want to pull that up and make sure that I can find it. Give me just 1 second. I swear this came through. And now I may be missing it. Okay, I may be missing it. But there have been questions about how do we handle months in which the veteran begins using their budget on a day other than the first. Okay, so, how do we really handle that? We will talk a little bit more about that, as well as if it takes 30, 60, 90 days to begin using their budget. We'll cover that in session 3. Just wanted to take a moment to make sure that's clear. Updating monthly service reports is going to be our next question that came through. What is the best practice for updating service reports? So it's the responsibility of the veteran, with support from the VDC provider, to track VDC spending. The couple things that we're tracking against are going to be, number one, if all spending aligns with what's in the approved spending plan, and making sure that we do not exceed that total authorized budget. Because those are the two situations in which VA medical centers are not required to reimburse for care. So any care that's outside of the spending plan or that exceeds the budget, the VA does not have to pay for. So what could happen here is now the veteran is responsible for payment to their workers that exceed that budget. And that's really critical to remember. We do not want to be putting veterans in that situation. What we have here in the last bullet are just some other features of the service report template that can be helpful to consider as a best practice. So there's an invoice tracker where you can actually look at actual spending by each month. You can enter information about when you submitted invoices, have you been paid. There's a tab, there's actually 12, so there's, let me say this again, in the second to last bullet, there is a tab for 12 calendar months with an optional 13-month tab. So if you think about that, if your authorization is from August 4th, 2021 through August 3rd, 2022, it's actually going to span a total of 13 months. So we wanted to make sure that we had 13 months of tabs available. There's also space for other information to be added that's listed in the bottom that really breaks down that spending within the month. This question was asked of Amanda, and Amanda, I may call on you again, but it's about completing monthly service reports. So on our next slide, who is responsible for completing and submitting the monthly service report? The FMS or the VDC provider? We get asked this question a lot. The answer is actually VDC providers are responsible for ensuring the accuracy and timely submission of monthly service reports. So if you're picking up on that nuance, really what I'm saying here is VDC providers may complete and submit the monthly service reports. FMS providers may play a role in that as well. What's critical here is that VDC providers are always reviewing and approving, ensuring the accuracy. So if an FMS provider, the way your process works, if they're developing MSRs, the VDC provider should always be reviewing them. I want to make sure that's clear. And there should be a process in place here. If you don't have a process, think about that process. What's your process for whoever is developing the MSR, who's sharing that with the VDC provider? If the VDC provider is developing the MSR, are you sharing that with the FMS provider? How is that being submitted to the VA Medical Center? How is that being shared with veterans and/or their authorized representatives? So think about that process. And remember that as the provider, you have the responsibility. And Amanda, I was going to come back to you real quick. I don't know if you want to talk about who actually develops the MSR and submits that to the medical center at Delta Center.
Absolutely. So we do, us as a VDC, we do our FMS and the case management piece in-house. So the options counselors do the case management piece of it. Then our payroll supervisor, she will develop and update those spreadsheets for the OCs. And then once that's all updated after the close of each month, our payroll supervisor is the one responsible for completing those MSRs and submitting them to the VA.
Thank you, Amanda. That's great. Really appreciate that. Okay. Our next question on veteran spending. What if the amount the veteran wants to spend that aren't directly personal care is more than the amount for personal care? That may sound strange. That seems strange. Could there be situations when the veteran spends more for services that are not direct personal care? Of course. There's an unlimited, infinite amount of possibilities here, and so dependent on the veteran's circumstances. It's permissible as long as that spending is documented in the approved spending plan and does not exceed the veteran's total budget. So we need to think about that, because if there's a reason for why the veteran is spending more on other services than direct personal care, it's going to be in the spending plan. We're going to document the veteran's goals. Why does the veteran need this care? What other services are going to be delivered? How is that important to the veteran? How are we making sure that this meets their needs? So we have that in the spending plan. There could certainly be reasons why that is clinically appropriate in a self-directed program, but there are also reasons why that would not be as well. So what's important is that it's in the spending plan, does not exceed the total budget. A couple other things we wanted to come back to about monthly service reports. Are there strategies for submitting timesheets? We get this question quite a bit. So are there strategies for following up for individuals that do not complete timesheets, delaying the ability to create monthly service reports? We heard from Amanda how important it is to get them timely so that we can review spending. Is it in the is it in the spending plan? Are they overspending? Are they underspending? The only way you can do that is if you get timely submissions of timesheets. Not even talking about the fact that VDC providers should not bill until timesheets are completed. So you should think about ways in which you can encourage timely submission. We have some suggestions here. I want to take a moment to recognize that every VDC program is a little bit different, but if you've had the opportunity to work with Sue Flanagan, if you're at an FMS or VDC provider, she has a number of templates that she has shared that really help hold individuals accountable and educate them on their roles and responsibilities. I wanted to share just a few examples of that. An employment agreement between a veteran and care provider. So that employment agreement can stipulate, hey, here's what you're going to do. And there are going to be a lot of things under that. And one of them is going to be you need to submit your timesheet on an agreed upon schedule. Another would be an employer agreement with the veteran and/or authorized representative to emphasize their role in submitting timesheets. The last one I just want to flag is a training and remediation policy. So that could say, hey, here are your responsibilities. Here's what happens if you do not follow them. If you do it the first time, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come out, we're going to talk about, hey, why can't you do your timesheet? What's going on? Is there something that we can help with? Let us tell you about, hey, here's why you need to do it. Here's why it's important. And by the way, if you don't do this again, here's what we're going to do. And then maybe the second time it happens, you go to that policy and say, okay, here's what we said we would do next time this happens. So let's talk about this again. And after that conversation, maybe you'll document, hey, if we need to come back out, we're going to need to evaluate whether or not you can manage the responsibilities of a self-directed program. So if you see here, we're communicating with the veteran at their level. We're going to meet them to try to identify what's going on. We're working towards solutions. We're also being very clear on those expectations and what happens with continued non-compliance. What's really difficult is if you don't do these things and you just have continual, late submissions, well, we're not really working towards a solution. We know that there's a problem, but we're not working towards a solution. And we can leverage some of these templates in a very veteran-centric way, veteran and caregiver-centric way. So if anyone wants copies of those agreements, your FMS, I'm sure, knows Sue Flanagan, but you can also reach out to the veteran-directed mailbox. Another question, very similar, but has to do with the underutilization of spending plans. So how do you handle underutilization of spending? And I just want to stop for a minute and say everything we're about to say, it applies to if there's underspending or overspending. What's most important is that we need to understand what's going on. And there's an unlimited number of reasons. You heard a great example from Laura for why there was overspending. There's a lot of reasons why there would be underspending. Let me give just 2 examples. So, is the typical work schedule clear to everyone? Is it clear to the veteran? Is it clear to the worker? Let's give an example of underspending. Well, maybe the veteran is worried about going over their budget. And so, they tell the worker when to come and they're not following the schedule. Maybe they aren't aware that that work schedule really helps them manage their budget. Like, hey, if you stick to these hours, this hourly range per day as a tier, you'll be fine with your budget. And it gives you an opportunity to communicate that. There could be reasons why they deviate. Is there a gap in care? Is the worker supposed to come help with, dressing in the morning, but they really struggle making their own breakfast. And so they ask the worker to stay and help. If we can help identify why there's a deviation from the schedule, it'll help us understand how we correct that. So we always need to be thinking about our person-centered approaches. And we need to be thinking about what do we find out and how do we fix that, to get them to follow their spending plan, and is a change to the spending plan needed? Because that's, of course, a possibility as well in all these situations. The next slide. This is going to be the last one, and then we'll try to get to a couple of questions as well that came through. But Bridget Lee started to ask this, and we're going to cover this in this question. So our coordinator, and that's going to be the VA Medical Center coordinator, does not require the monthly service report. Should we submit them somewhere else? So first, you should be submitting them monthly. Your VA coordinator, so all of our VA coordinators on the call, you should be collecting these monthly. Does not necessarily mean that you review every single one every single month. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But VDC providers should be working with their medical centers to submit this monthly. Okay, so the first is, if you're a VA medical center, if you get any questions about billing and invoicing, you're going to have that monthly service report to look at, to compare it to the spending plan. Maybe you're doing that every month. Maybe you're doing it once a quarter. Maybe for veterans who have been in the program a long time, maybe you need to do that once every 6 months. So there's no perfect answer to that. But you should be comparing, at least at some point, the monthly service report to the monthly spending plan. We heard from Amanda and Laura that they talk about service reports. They have a weekly meeting. They're not discussing every veteran every single time, but maybe there's 1 or 2 veterans that they really need to focus on in that weekly call. Hey, here's what's going on with Mr. So-and-so. We're seeing this in the service report. Let me tell you about my last interaction with him or her. And then they're working to solve that problem. Are there other VA supports that can help? Is there new DME needed in the home? And does there seem to be an issue with maybe his medications where we need to follow up with his primary care team? So there's a lot of reasons why medical centers and VDC providers would be using this on an ad hoc basis, but we need to make sure that information is available and that we follow our requirements for the program. That's all the questions that we got to cover in our slide deck today. We have a Menti poll. I'm going to bring that up maybe just for a minute before we move to our closing. What's one change? Remember, that change could be big or small that you would implement within the next 90 days, 3 months, for monthly service reports. So if we go back to Menti 12859685, it's a different code, I believe, Haley. Let me make sure, Haley, the code in the red is the one we should be using. Is that correct?
It should be the original code, so 98373862, which appears in that screenshot.
Thank you. Okay, so we see it here. That code again, 98373862. So adopt a spending plan. Review spending with veteran. I love that. So if that's not part of your process, think about how much engagement you would get by talking about spending with the veteran. Have them own that. We know that VDC provides the opportunity to empower, we're empowering veterans to take control, to make decisions. So we want to promote working with veterans and reviewing those plans. Making sure MSRs are accurate, yes. Working collaboratively with your medical center. Put the schedule of caregivers in. Deliver more timely, right? Yeah, having a well-oiled systematic machine for MSRs is really going to promote some veteran-centric practices. Okay, I love these coming in. I'm going to try to take just a question or two, just real quick, and then any questions we don't get to, just to make sure that it's clear, we will cover on our next session as well. As a reminder, so we'll be sending out today's slides. It'll have links where you can get all these, all of the materials. So the service reports, the templates is also in the chat today. A good question here. This is to everyone, and I'll take this one, and then I'm going to stop. And I promise we'll come back to all the other ones on our next call. So if the provider only bills the daily rate for days when direct care was provided to the veteran, how are goods billed then? And that's in page 14 of the billing guide. So we want to make sure that this is clear. So what we do here when we're invoicing for veteran directed care is we take the total spending in the month. So personal care, other goods and services, plus the admin fee. Okay, that total amount, like let's say that's $2,000. Then we divide that by the number of days in which the veteran received personal care. So let's say that's 10 days. So that $2,000 that you're invoicing for, divided by 10, so $200 a day. You would be billing $200 a day for those 10 days in that month. I made the math very easy on myself here, but just to make sure that's clear, you're billing for everything in that month. And you're just averaging out those costs for the days in which the veteran received personal care. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I hope that helped. Happy to come back and answer that on the next call if it wasn't clear. Okay, we have about 2 minutes. We've covered a lot. I just want to say thank you again. We have a closing slide. So let's do that real quick. And Victoria, I'm going to hand this over to you, if you don't mind, closing us out today.
Thanks, Pat. This is awesome. There's some stuff that I picked up and learned from this session. So I hope with all the attendees today that they have picked up something, apply what you've learned to help with your program. Please continue to submit your question in the chat box for any question, like Pat said, that we were not able to answer at this time. We will do a recap at our next session. Also, like what Pat mentioned, we'll have the slide deck and the recording for this session available at the VDC No Wrong Door website. In closing, there will be a post-event survey. We didn't do this on the first session, but we would love to hear from you guys, your feedback, just how do you like this session and stuff like that. So If you have time, please complete the survey. And like I said, we would love to hear from you guys what you think about the session. Of note, we have the ACL Technical Assistant Community, where you can continue conversation using the discussion board located in the VDC community on the ACL TA community site. So please watch out. We'll be posting some of collaboration that we'll have in this site. So and also it's a good collaboration tool to work or check with your peers to see and to talk about things that are challenging or anything that is that you can get resources from each other. So feel free to use this one. And for our last VDC Office Hour session, our focus topic will be the VDC invoices and monitoring of VDC account receivables monthly service report. Please watch out for that invite. I would like to say thank you to all the providers who continue to submit their data on the monthly reporting tool. If you have not submitted any data to us, please consider doing so in the near future. This data help you as well as the VA and ACL to analyze the status of the veterans served by VDC. Lastly, if you have any question or concern, please feel free to contact our VDC mailbox at veterandirected@acl.hhs.gov. I would like to say thank you for all your participation and a special thank you to our guest speaker. And we look forward to seeing you at our next VDC Office Hour session. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.